New Mexico Territory, late autumn 1882. The air comes thin off the plain like a prayer that never learned to finish. The church stands alone on the edge of a wind-beaten prairie, its white paint flaking under the weight of forgotten prayers. The steeple leans a fraction, stubborn as a man who won't admit he's tired. Grass bows in one direction, then the other, and the fence posts keep their watch like old men with sore backs. It smells of dry wood, iron dust, and faint rain too far away to help. Even the flies move slowly, as if the heat taught them humility. He waits a long time before the first cut into the ground, hands still on the handle, breath easing in and out until it doesn't scrape anymore. He digs with a slow, uneven rhythm, each thrust of the spade pulling something heavier than soil. The first shovel of dirt has a sound to it, a dull break in the earth that echoes in the ribs. He hears it there, where memory lives when a mind grows careful. The sky holds the color of pewter, promising rain but withholding it, like a mercy never granted. He does not curse. He does not ask. He only digs because something inside won't unclench until the ground has been opened and told the truth. His coat hangs on a nail by the door, but cold creeps anyway, the kind that sits on the knuckles and won't leave. He rolls his sleeves, not out of resolve but out of habit, and the muscles in his forearms jump like quiet fish under water. Each lift of the spade sends a tremor up his wrists, and into the soft places a man learns to ignore when he must. The nervous system keeps a ledger of unfinished business. The palms remember weight, the back remembers names. He feels all of it now, the history under the hard pan, the faint sting of blisters not yet formed, the way breath gathers at the base of the throat when something important approaches. He tells himself, this is only dirt, only stones, only roots that twist and resist the way roots do. But the body knows better. It listens to the small changes, the shift in smell when damp clay appears, the different ring of metal against buried wood, the pull in the lungs when the wind falls suddenly quiet. He takes another cut, another. The rhythm steadies, a metronome for the heart. Dig, lift, turn, breathe. Dig, lift, turn, breathe. The repetition slows the panic and arranges the thoughts into rows as straight as furrows after spring rain. He is not rushing. He is building a place inside big enough for the truth to stand. A moth stutters against the chapel window, dusting the glass with its wings, then finds the crack and is gone. Far off, a hawk draws a circle over the scrub, the circle it has drawn since the first fence was hammered into the prairie. His shadow tilts as clouds travel, the blade bites deeper where the soil darkens. He feels the give, then the stubbornness again, then a give that isn't soil at all. The spade shudders like it struck a nerve. He kneels, the denim darkening at the knees, and works with his fingers, sifting grit through the grooves of his prints until grit becomes grain, and grain gives way to something not earth. A glint in the dirt stops his hands, a small tarnished ring, cold against his palm, carrying the shape of a memory he had buried long before. He doesn't lift it right away. He listens to the silence around it, the way a man listens at a closed door before turning the latch. Wind threads through the broken clapboards. The bell rope outside sways and knocks once, a sound like a wrist against a table edge. He pinches the ring free with his forefinger and thumb. It is light, lighter than it looks, like things that matter always are. The curve of it fits a circle he knows without looking. He holds it as if heat might rise from it any second, and in the soft metal he feels an ache he refuses to give a name. He studies the chapel steps, uneven, worn low in the middle by feet that hesitated there, by skirts that brushed past, by boys who ran when they shouldn't have. He sees a seam in the paint where some hand once tried to make the old new. Memory works like that, he thinks, layers painted over, each one cracking in its time, the oldest color shining through when the sun climbs high enough. He slips the ring into his fist, then opens his hand again to make sure it's still there, the way a child checks a tooth under a pillow. He does not put it in his pocket. He doesn't trust pockets today. He trusts only breath, grip, ground, and the rule that what is found by honest work deserves to be held with honest care. He keeps digging, not for more metal, but because the hole needs shape. Edges squared, floor smoothed, the kind of order that calms the chest and tells the mind we are safe enough to feel. soil piles in a neat ribbon at his side. The church's shadow slides a few inches, and the light changes temperature the way grief does when it moves from the eyes to the throat. He remembers a Sunday dress with a hem repaired the night before. He remembers a hymn hummed in the kitchen when no one was listening, which means someone always was. The tune returns without words. He lets it. The body will finish the verse in its own way if the tongue keeps quiet. That pewter sky tightens, then loosens, then sets again. Promises of rain, still no rain. The mind, like weather, makes and breaks its oaths, but the ground keeps what it's given. He presses his palm to the dirt he opened, not to sanctify it, not to apologize, but to show his nervous system a simple, clear fact. This is real, and you survived it. The contact softens something in his shoulders. He feels the slow drop of his heart back into its proper seat. He thinks of how a brain will calm when the hands are busy, how the limbic drum eases when the task is clear and the rhythm steady. Dig, lift, turn, breathe. The oldest medicine. He stands, wipes sweat with the inside of his wrist and looks long at the doorframe where white paint flakes into curls. One curl falls, then another, and the threshold shines a thin line of raw wood, like a scar that's learned to live with the sun. He leans the spade against the wall and reaches for the canteen on the step. The first swallow burns a little, then the second smooths it out. Water works its small, faithful miracle, throat to chest to belly, until the body remembers it belongs here. He stays with that feeling. He keeps the ring pressed into his palm. There are prayers men say with words, and prayers men say with pressure. This is the second kind. He thinks of leaving the ring where he found it. He thinks of slipping it into the crack beneath the sill. He thinks of carrying it until it grows warm enough to tell him what to do. The mind wants rules. The heart wants time. He gives both what they ask by standing still. The wind combs through the buffalo grass and finds a new note in its long song. He listens for hoofbeats, for voices, for the particular cough of a wagon wheel he has known since boyhood. None come. Only the plain speaking in its dry tongue, and the faint click of the steeple cross when the breeze shifts north. He walks the fence line once, slow, a circuit to mark the boundary of his intention. The posts lean, but hold. Barbed wire hums lightly where it gathers the wind. He stops at the corner where the cedar was planted. The spring his hands were smaller. He presses his thumb into the bark and feels the tree answer with its own kind of pulse, the patient rhythm of sap rising in a world that takes and takes but still permits this. He thinks about dignity and how it looks like a man doing one true thing with both hands. He thinks about forgiveness and how it never rides in loud. It arrives like a ring in dust, small, tarnished, perfectly shaped to what's been missing. He returns to the hole and flattens the floor with the back of the spade. He does not hurry. He is building a first room for a long conversation. He knows the old grief is not finished. He knows a first shovel of dirt wakes snakes and saints both, but he also knows that movement, however small, teaches the heart to trust the body again. He closes his eyes and maps the place where the ring touched his skin. He opens them and watches his breath leave like smoke. He places the canteen back on the step. He tucks the spade where the wall will remember it. He stays another moment in the doorway's quiet, the kind that makes a man taller by asking nothing but honesty in return. The light fades along the chapel siding, trading silver for iron. The sky holds the color of pewter, promising rain but withholding it, like a mercy never granted. He turns the ring once, twice, feeling its weight, which is both nothing and everything. Then he steps down onto the hardpan and lets the door fall to, soft, no echo, just wood finding wood, the way a pulse finds rhythm after a long run. The first part is done, not finished, done enough to breathe. The earth is open, the hands are clean, and a circle has returned to a palm that forgot how to close around anything but work. He does not look back at the hole. He doesn't need to. The ground has learned his name all over again. The ring has remembered the shape of a finger it once knew. The chapel listens as chapels do, keeping what men cannot say. And out on the prairie, at the edge of sight, a line of rain hangs like a curtain not ready to fall. Yet the smell of it loosens the jaw, softens the eyes, and tells the old, guarded brain, you are not alone here. Not tonight. Not with dirt under your nails and a circle in your hand. The wind had eased to a low hum by the time he straightened his back, earth still clinging to his hands. Behind him, the chapel's shadow stretched long and thin over the prairie, as if trying to claim him before the light gave out. He caught the faint scrape of boots on gravel. A man stood at the fence line, elbows resting on the top rail, like it was the only thing holding him upright. His hat brim hid most of his face, but not the way his eyes stayed fixed on the patch of ground Silas had disturbed. No greeting came, just a slow, deliberate meeting of eyes, two men measuring the weight the other carried without laying a hand on it. The stranger's boots were caked with dried mud that cracked when he shifted, and the set of his jaw said he'd been out on the road longer than he cared to remember. Silas turned back to the earth, smoothing the mound as if that could erase the question he saw forming in the man's gaze. It didn't. The silence between them thickened, not hostile, but heavy, like the air before rain. Then the man moved, not toward him, but toward the chapel door. He reached into his coat and took out a folded scrap of paper, yellowed at the edges, and laid it on the lowest fence rail. A single nail, bent and rusted, pinned it there against the wind. By the time Silas looked up, the stranger was already walking away, boots whispering over the gravel, leaving nothing behind but the faint sway of the fence and that nailed scrap of paper waiting in the stillness. The nailed scrap of paper stayed where the stranger had left it, the bent metal holding its secret against the rail. He took it without unfolding it, slipping it into his coat as if opening it in daylight might scatter whatever truth it held. The walk into town was long enough for the questions to settle deep in his chest, unspoken but steady, like a stone in a pocket. The general store door creaked in that tired way wood does when it's been asked to hold more years than it should. Inside, the smell of dust, molasses, and gun oil met him. Voices dropped the way they do when someone walks in, carrying a history the room would rather not face. Two women by the counter bent their heads together, whispering. He caught one word, the kind that carries more judgment than explanation, and let it pass without chasing it. Near the dry goods shelves, an older woman shifted her shawl, the fringe knotted just as his mother used to. It wasn't the same one, but the way her hands adjusted it stirred something sharper than memory. He moved past without speaking, but their eyes met for a moment, long enough for her to look away first. The back room smelled of spilled coffee and damp cloth. On a low shelf behind a crate of canned peaches he saw it, a chipped teacup, its glaze worn to a dull softness, a missing piece at the rim. The break was in the exact place as the one his mother kept by her sewing chair, the one she refused to throw away. He touched the edge with his thumb. It was cold, the kind of cold that doesn't come from weather. He stepped back into the main room, the murmurs rising again like wind through dry grass. Coins rang at the counter. A broom scratched across the floorboards, but under it all the weight of the place pressed against him. Out on the boardwalk the air felt wider, but the echo of those glances followed, trailing him like the shadow of a woman the town had chosen to forget. The shadow of a woman the town had chosen to forget seemed to lengthen with the setting sun, following him back across the open ground toward the chapel. Twilight draped itself over the prairie in slow folds, blurring the edges of fences and brush, until the white paint of the chapel walls was the only pale thing left in the field. He did not light a lamp. The boards under his boots knew the sound of his weight, and the door gave way with the quiet sigh of old hinges. Inside, the air held a different stillness than it did in daylight. The scent of pine from the warped pews mingled with something faint but familiar, lamp oil and rain-wet cloth. Moonlight spilled through the cracked panes, bending into strange shapes across the floor. He stood in the farthest corner, letting the dark close around him. Footsteps came, slow and careful, the kind that belonged to someone not wanting to be found. A figure moved down the aisle, the long coat hem brushing against the floorboards in a sound softer than paper. They paused at the second pew on the left, the one his mother had claimed every Sunday, hands folded, eyes forward. From a small pouch, the visitor drew a single candle, setting it gently in the worn groove of the wood. The match flared, and for an instant, light bared their face, but only enough to know it was unfamiliar. The flame wavered once, twice, then steadied, casting its gold across the pew like it belonged there. The figure stayed a moment, head bowed, before turning back toward the door. He remained in the shadows until the sound of their steps faded into the night. Alone again, he stepped forward, resting his fingers on the smooth back of the pew. The wood was warm where the light touched it, and he let his hand stay there, feeling the heat seep into his skin as if the past itself had reached out and taken hold. The warmth in the wood lingered against his palm even after he stepped back into the cold night. It stayed with him through the walk into town, the moon riding low, the prairie whispering in broken breaths of wind. The sheriff's office glowed faintly from a single lamp inside, the light settling over the dust like a thin layer of amber. He pushed the door open. The smell of tobacco and damp wool met him first, followed by the scrape of a chair leg. The sheriff sat behind his desk, shoulders bent over a ledger, the nib of his pen scratching through names. Some were crossed in red, the ink thick and deliberate, each stroke cutting clean through the paper. The sheriff didn't look up right away. When he did, his eyes landed not on Silas's face but on the dirt still clinging to his boots. "You're digging in places best left alone," he said, voice even but without welcome. On the desk's corner lay a rusted tin star, edges dulled by years, catching the lamplight in brief flashes. It glinted like something meant to warn more than protect. The sheriff tapped the ledger with his finger. "You want answers? They'll cost you more than you've got." Silas said nothing. He glanced once at the red-marked names, at the neat column of the living beside the blotted remains of the gone. The sheriff closed the ledger slowly, as if sealing the conversation along with it. The sound of the cover falling shut was small, but it stayed in the air, heavier than the smell of smoke. When Silas stepped back into the street, the cold hit him sharp. Behind him, the lamplight in the window burned on, unblinking, over a desk where the truth had been measured and priced like any other trade. The lamplight behind him faded with each step, until only the pale wash of moonlight guided his way beyond the last row of buildings, the cold bit sharper out here, free from the shelter of walls. He followed the road past the windmill and down toward the barns, where the air smelled of hay, dry earth, and the faint sourness of old rain soaked into the wood. Inside, the dark was thick, broken only by the silver threads slipping through the spaces between warped boards. He moved toward the loft ladder, his boots muted by the packed dirt floor. Something drew his eye, a seam in one of the thick beams that didn't belong. Up close, it was a hollow, just wide enough for a hand. His fingers met cloth, oilcloth stiff with time and dust, edges cracked like old skin. He pulled it free and unwrapped it slowly, each fold releasing a breath of stale air from years sealed away. Inside lay a letter, the paper yellowed, the handwriting pressed deep into the fibers as if written with more weight than ink could carry. It was his mother's hand. He knew the tilt of each letter, the way the pen hesitated before a word that mattered. But the name at the top was not one he had ever heard. He read the first few lines, the rest blurring as the shape of the truth began to shift in him. A thin, pressed flower slid from between the folds, its petals brittle, breaking as they touched the dirt. He caught one piece in his palm, its color long faded, yet holding the ghost of what it had been. The barn around him felt smaller now, the air closer, as if the walls knew the letter's weight. He folded it back into the oilcloth with the same care he had unwrapped it. Some things could not be returned to where they'd been, but they could be carried. And tonight, that was all he could do. And tonight, that was all he could do. The barn door groaned as he pushed it open, spilling him back into the open dark. Clouds had thickened over the mesa, swallowing the moon until the land was little more than shadow and the sound of the wind. The air carried a weight that had nothing to do with weather, though the smell of distant rain rode its edge. He took the long way back toward the chapel, skirting the road, staying in the low ground where sagebrush and mesquite grew thick. Far off, a line of riders moved across the ridge, silhouettes against a sky turning the color of molten iron. They didn't look at him, didn't slow. Each carried something long and wrapped in cloth, resting against the saddle like an unspoken sentence. The wind shifted, and the chapel bell rang once. Just once. The sound was clean and hollow, without the quiver of a rope pulled by human hands. It lingered in the air longer than it should have, as if the metal itself resisted letting go. He stopped, the oilcloth-wrapped letter pressed tight inside his coat. The clouds rolled lower, stealing what little horizon remained. In the distance, the riders slipped from view, their shapes swallowed by the land. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was a held breath, a waiting. The kind of quiet that comes before something arrives you can't turn away from and can't stop. The kind of quiet that comes before something arrives you can't turn away from and can't stop, held him there until the air began to move again. He turned toward the chapel, its pale walls dim under the gathering storm, the steeple a dark spear against the restless sky. The earth behind it was undisturbed now, the ground he had opened smoothed over, as if no hand had ever broken it. He walked to that place, boots sinking slightly into the softened crust of soil. The ring was waiting on the chapel steps, resting in the shallow cup of wood worn down by years of weather. Not claimed, not returned, simply placed, as though someone had known it didn't belong in the earth after all. He picked it up without looking around. It was warmer than before, the tarnish still dark, but the weight changed, lighter in a way he couldn't name. He closed his hand over it, feeling the thin band press into his skin. The wind shifted again, carrying the scent of rain, sharp and clean, but no drop fell. He stood there a long while, the letter against his chest, the ring in his palm, the silence around him no longer a warning but a witness. When he finally stepped away, he didn't look back. The boards of the chapel sighed in the wind, the bell rope swayed without sound, and the space behind the church, for the first time in years, did not feel empty. The horizon waited, dark and unbroken, as he walked toward it, carrying what could not be buried,